Hey there, I'm Alex Kidman, and this is the MacBook Air M4. Let's get into the review. So in design terms, the MacBook Air M4, well, it comes in sky blue, which is what this colour is. I know it probably looks kind of silver to you, and that's because it's a very subtle blue colour. But the big thing in design terms is that's it. That's the sole design change that Apple has made this year. It's got the same 13 or 15-inch screen as last year's model. This one's the 13-inch model, loaned to me by Apple Australia. It's got the same minimal number of ports on it. That does still kind of irk me because the two USB-C Thunderbolt 4 ports are quite close together on one side. I'd really love it if it was on both sides, but that's something that you only get with a MacBook Pro. Similarly, if you want the nano texture coating thing, that's also MacBook Pro only. Apple's one sop to MacBook Air buyers this time around is that this thing finally supports dual monitors properly out of the box. I've never really believed Apple's reasons for why the Air didn't do so before. They used to, at one point, kind of allude to the idea that it didn't have enough processing power to do it, but it's stepped up into processors that have run MacBook Pros, which have run multiple displays for many, many years now. So better late than never, I guess. Of course, the real story of the MacBook Air M4 isn't what it's wrapped in, which is perfectly functional, if not all that exciting. It's the changes that Apple's made under the hood. For a start, 16 gig of RAM is now the baseline for any MacBook, or indeed any Mac at all, which raises a nice performance bar when and if you need it, whether that's for high-end work or just because you like keeping 257 Safari tabs open all at once. Yeah, I see you there, but no judgment, mind. The MacBook Air M4 is the M4 model because it brings into the fold the M4 processor, now found across the entire Mac range. This is Apple's 4th generation Apple Silicon processor, and what that means is that everything is on the one blob of silicon. So the processor, the GPU, the RAM, the storage, it's all on the one bit of silicon. And that is important because it means what you buy is what you've got. And that's it. This is not really an upgradable machine in that sense. And at least according to iFixit, it's not a terribly repairable one either, if that matters to you. The M4 isn't new. I've previously tested it on devices such as the Mac Mini M4 and MacBook Pro M4, but it is worth noting that the MacBook Air M4 only ships with the baseline M4 processor. If you want the M4 Pro or M4 Max processors, you'll have to look to systems such as the MacBook Pro or Mac Studio lines. Now, there are still some configuration choices to make, and like I said, it is really important that you get those choices right when you're buying. The model loaned to me by Apple Australia, for example, was essentially the baseline model, 16 gig of RAM and a 10-core CPU, GPU 13-inch variant, but it did have the storage bumped up to 1 terabyte from the stock 256 gig. And that model would run you here in Australia $2,299, where the baseline 256 would only run you $1,699 because Apple has always charged a lot for storage upgrades. For what it's worth, here in Australia, a fully spec'd out 15-inch model with all the trimmings would run you $3,899. So how does all of that compare when you're using the MacBook Air M4? Well, as you might expect, it depends on what you compare it against. So here's how the model loaned to me stacked up. First of all, using Geekbench's benchmarks across a range of Apple Mac products. So the MacBook Air M4 acquits itself really well. I mean, the Pro model does outdo it at least a little bit, and that's not exactly a huge surprise. There are other reasons why you might want that Pro model, the screen and more ports and so on. The M4 Pro, of course, is faster and better, but that's not a surprise either because it certainly should be, given what you pay for an M4 Pro, and it's a decent enough step up, arguably not from the M3, but certainly the M2, the M1, and the older Intel-based Mac Airs. Yeah, you'll definitely see a big jump there in terms of your overall performance. And if you prefer a more processor-intensive test, here's how most of those models compare using Cinebench R23. On the battery life side of the equation, Apple's contention is that the MacBook Air M4 can run for up to 18 hours of wireless video streaming. And look, that's not the highest claimed figure I've seen for an ultra-portable laptop, but it is a highly suitable one for everyday users, presuming they want to sleep at some point. In my own testing, yeah, look, all-day battery life, or certainly all working day battery life, isn't hard to achieve at all, which is impressive when you consider that the M4 processor in this machine is more powerful than older MacBooks were. You do get a charger in the box. It's MagSafe connected. That's why the MagSafe port is there. It doesn't really do anything else but power, but you don't have to use it. I'll be honest here and say that I've primarily charged this laptop up via Thunderbolt 4, just via one of those USB-C ports. As long as you've got a decent quality power delivery capable charger, it'll do the trick really nicely. So should you buy the MacBook Air M4? Well, look, the pricing this year starts at $1,699 Australian, and that's significant simply because the entry-level model of last year's MacBook Air M3 started at $1,799. Apple still prices itself as a premium brand. Nobody sane would call a MacBook Air M4 cheap, but it is pleasing to see a level of price drop here. However, there is a slight catch with that pricing. Now, when I reviewed the MacBook Air M3 last year, I noted that because the MacBook Air M2 was still available and at a lower price, that model might make more sense for everyday users looking for a macOS machine because it was older, it was cheaper. And you might have expected Apple to slot the MacBook Air M3 into that lower price MacBook Air space while it bumped off the MacBook Air M2 entirely. But instead, and seemingly in return for that price cut, it sliced away any non-M4 MacBook Air model at all. The cheapest Mac laptop you can get is the $1,699 MacBook Air M4, because there isn't any other model officially available at all. Obviously, you might see some older M3s, maybe some M2s in other retail places, but Apple certainly will not sell you one again. And honestly, if you're after a budget Mac, my recommendation would actually be the Mac Mini, unless you need the portability of a laptop. The Mac Mini is a fine option, and it does critically run you less than $1,000 in its baseline specification. The MacBook Air M4 is a fine machine and a good upgrade along the way, but I can't help but feel a little bit annoyed that Apple didn't keep the MacBook Air M3 around for the true bargain buyer crowd.